The grand halls of the Celestial Summit Station hummed with tension as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for what many considered humanity's last chance at proving their worth. Arya Blackwood stood at the observation deck, her dark eyes reflecting the dance of distant stars. At 32, she had become Earth's youngest senior diplomat, known for her brilliant mind and unwavering determination. Yet even she felt the weight of today's responsibilities pressing down on her shoulders. The Astrian Empire, with their advanced technology and centuries of interstellar influence, had always viewed humans as barely more than clever primitives. Emperor Validus's recent decree restricting human expansion in the Orion sector had pushed relations to a breaking point. This summit was humanity's chance to negotiate for their future among the stars. Arya adjusted her formal attire, a sleek black suit with subtle silver threading that paid homage to both human fashion and alien sensibilities. Her hand brushed against the data crystal in her pocket, containing years of research that proved humans could contribute meaningfully to galactic society. If only the Astrians would listen. The summit chamber doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing a space that merged organic architecture with crystalline technology. Arya took her place among the Earth delegation, noting the empty seats across the chamber where the Astrian representatives would soon sit. The murmur of various species communicating in their native tongues filled the air, translation devices working overtime to maintain understanding. When the Astrian delegation entered, the chamber fell silent. Emperor Validus led them, his tall frame draped in robes that seemed to capture and reflect starlight. But it was the figure beside him that caught Arya's attention, Prince Theron, whose presence at such a crucial summit was unexpected. Unlike his father's rigid posture, Theron moved with a fluid grace that spoke of both military training and scholarly pursuits. His silver-white hair was tied back in the traditional Astrian style, but something in his bearing suggested a mind less bound by convention than his father's. Their eyes met across the chamber, and Arya felt an unexpected jolt of recognition, not of his face, which she had seen in briefings, but of something deeper, a shared curiosity that transcended species. Emperor Validus's opening speech was everything they had feared. The human expansion must be contained, he declared, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of authority. Their reckless advancement threatens the stability we have maintained for millennia. Arya waited for her turn to speak, gathering her thoughts. When she stood, she felt rather than saw Prince Theron's attention shift to her. Honorable representatives, she began, her voice clear and steady, we stand before you not as threats to stability, but as potential partners in progress. The research I present today demonstrates how human innovation, combined with Astrian wisdom, could revolutionize terraforming technology. As she spoke, displaying holographic models of joint human-Astrian projects, she noticed Theron leaning forward slightly, his expression intense. His father remained impassive, but the prince's interest was unmistakable. When the session broke for recess, Arya found herself walking through the station's botanical gardens, seeking a moment of quiet to prepare for the afternoon's negotiations. Your proposals are ambitious, a voice said behind her. She turned to find Prince Theron, standing alone among the exotic flora. Up close, his features were even more striking, high cheekbones and eyes that shifted color like aurora borealis. Your Highness, Arya acknowledged, maintaining diplomatic protocol while noting the absence of his usual guards. Ambition is sometimes necessary for progress. Indeed. He moved closer, examining a luminescent flower. But my father sees only the risks, not the potential. Your species' rapid advancement from planetary civilization to spacefaring race in mere centuries concerns him deeply. And you? Arya asked, watching him carefully. What do you see? A slight smile touched his lips. I see possibility. Your presentation on adaptive terraforming algorithms, it mirrors some of my own research. Though I suspect my father would not approve of such collaborative thinking. Before Arya could respond, a commotion from the main chamber drew their attention. An aide rushed into the garden. Your Highness, your father requests your immediate presence. There's been an incident with the Proximan delegation. Theron's expression shifted to one of careful neutrality, but his eyes held Aria's for a moment longer than necessary. We will continue this discussion, Diplomat Blackwood. Perhaps there is more common ground between our peoples than my father believes. As he left, Arya remained in the garden, her mind racing. The prince's interest could be either an opportunity or a complication. His father's opposition to human expansion was legendary, and any perception of human influence over the heir to the Astrian throne would be politically explosive. Yet as she returned to the summit chamber, Arya couldn't shake the feeling that this unexpected connection with Prince Theron might be exactly what both their peoples needed, if they could survive the storm it would surely create. The afternoon session began with renewed tension, but now she felt the weight of two sets of eyes upon her, Emperor Validus's cold calculation, and his son's intense curiosity. The game had changed, and Arya knew that every word, every gesture would need to be perfectly calculated. The fate of human expansion hung in the balance, but suddenly, the path forward seemed both more complicated and more promising than ever before. 2 weeks after the initial summit, the Celestial Station had transformed from a diplomatic venue into a hub of scientific collaboration. Or at least, that was the official explanation for why Prince Theron still lingered in the human sector, much to his father's barely concealed displeasure. Arya stood in the Advanced Research Lab, watching as holographic models of terraforming simulations danced through the air. The prince worked at a console nearby, his fingers moving with practiced precision over the controls. They had been meeting like this, under the guise of scientific cooperation, almost daily since their encounter in the garden. The human approach to atmospheric modification is fascinating, Theron said, manipulating a three-dimensional model of a planet's weather patterns. You achieve in decades what our traditional methods take centuries to accomplish. We had to learn to be efficient, Arya replied, making adjustments to the simulation's parameters. Earth taught us harsh lessons about environmental change. When we began terraforming Mars, we couldn't afford to wait centuries. Their work had become a delicate dance of shared knowledge and careful boundaries. Every conversation balanced on the edge between professional collaboration and something deeper, more dangerous. The way Theron's eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking hadn't gone unnoticed, nor had the way her heart raced whenever they worked close together. Your father's latest proposal would effectively halt all human terraforming projects in the Orion sector, Arya said, keeping her voice neutral despite the frustration she felt. He claims our methods are too unpredictable. Theron's expression darkened. My father sees the galaxy through the lens of the past. The Astrian Empire has maintained its protocols unchanged for millennia. Change frightens him. He paused, then added more quietly, as does anything he cannot control. A soft chime interrupted them, a proximity alert warning of approaching visitors. They smoothly shifted apart, their movements practiced after many such interruptions. Moments later, Ambassador Relan, one of Emperor Validus's most trusted advisors, entered the lab. Your Highness, Relan's voice carried a note of disapproval as his eyes darted between Theron and Arya. Your father requests your presence for the evening meal. He wishes to discuss your extended stay on the station. Of course, Theron replied smoothly. Diplomat Blackwood and I were just concluding our analysis of the Proxima B terraform projections. He saved their work with a few quick commands, but Arya noticed him slipping a data crystal into his pocket, one containing their private research. After they left, Arya remained in the lab, reviewing their progress. Their combined approach to terraforming was revolutionary, mixing Astrian stability with human innovation. But she knew it was more than scientific breakthrough that kept drawing them back to each other. Later that night, unable to sleep, Arya made her way to the station's observation dome. The vast expanse of space stretched before her, stars scattered like diamonds on black velvet. She heard soft footsteps behind her and didn't need to turn to know who it was. My father is pushing for my return to Astria Prime, Theron said, moving to stand beside her. He believes I'm being influenced by too much human contact. Is he wrong? Arya asked, finally turning to face him. In the starlight, his features seemed to glow with an inner light, his eyes swirling with colors that reminded her of nebulae. About the influence? No. His voice was soft but certain. About it being a problem? Entirely. He reached out, his fingers brushing against hers in the darkness. I've accessed records of Earth's history, studying how your people faced change and adversity. The courage to transform, to evolve, it's something my people have forgotten in our pursuit of stability. Change isn't always welcome, Arya warned, though she didn't pull her hand away. Especially by those in power. Which is precisely why it's necessary. Theron's grip tightened slightly. Our research proves that our peoples can work together, create something greater than either could alone. But my father. A sudden commotion in the corridor outside interrupted them. They separated swiftly, but not quickly enough. Ambassador Relan stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable but his posture rigid with disapproval. Your Highness, his voice was cold. Your father's guards are searching for you. He wishes to discuss some concerning reports about your activities on the station. Theron straightened, every inch the royal prince. Tell my father I will meet with him shortly. His tone left no room for argument, and Relan, despite his obvious reluctance, withdrew. Once they were alone again, Theron turned to Arya. Whatever happens, protect our research. It's more important than either of us now. He pressed something into her hand, a second data crystal, one she hadn't seen before. This contains my personal authorization codes. If anything happens. Theron, she started, but he shook his head. Promise me, Arya. Promise you'll find a way to make them see what we've discovered, not just about terraforming, but about what our peoples could achieve together. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with the weight of their shared discoveries and the growing certainty that they had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. The data crystal felt heavy in her hand, its contents potentially explosive enough to reshape the relationship between their peoples, or tear them apart forever. The transition of power within the Astrian Empire proved far from smooth. 3 months after Emperor Validus's public exposure, the Celestial Station had become the center of a delicate dance of power and reform. Arya found herself working longer hours than ever, helping navigate the complex merger of human and Astrian terraforming initiatives while anti-human factions within the Empire fought against every change. Another protest on Astria Prime, Theron reported during one of their late-night strategy sessions. The regent's responsibilities had left dark circles under his eyes, but he carried himself with the same quiet determination. They're calling for my removal and a return to traditional values. Arya studied the holographic reports floating between them. Your father's supporters are more organized than we anticipated. These aren't just spontaneous demonstrations, someone's coordinating them. Ambassador Relan, Theron confirmed, bringing up another set of intelligence reports. He's been quietly gathering support among the old guard. They see our cooperation with humans as a sign of weakness, a betrayal of everything the Empire stands for. Their private quarters in the diplomatic wing had become a command center of sorts, walls covered with data streams and strategic analyses. The space represented their own small rebellion against protocol, a human and an Astrian leader working side by side, personal boundaries blurring as professional ones fell away. The first joint terraforming project is crucial, Arya said, pulling up the plans for the Proxima B initiative. If we can demonstrate successful results. The station's alert system cut her off, blaring to life with an urgent warning. Security Chief Desmond's voice came through the comm system, multiple unauthorized ships dropping out of hyperspace. They're broadcasting Imperial military signatures, but something's wrong with the authentication codes. Theron's expression hardened as he accessed the tactical displays. Those are ships loyal to Relan. He's making his move. He turned to Arya, his eyes intense. The research facilities would be his primary target, she finished, already moving. All our joint projects, the proof of what we can achieve together. Go, Theron ordered, already connecting to the Imperial Defense Network. I'll coordinate with our loyal forces, but you need to secure the data. Everything we've worked for depends on it. Arya raced through the station's corridors, her mind racing faster than her feet. The research labs contained more than just scientific data, they held the proof of years of Imperial deception, evidence that could either cement the new alliance or destroy it completely if it fell into the wrong hands. She reached the main lab just as the first explosions rocked the station. Through the reinforced windows, she could see ships engaging in combat, energy weapons lighting up the darkness of space. Inside the lab, she found Dr. Patel and his team already implementing emergency protocols. Tell me we have backups, she demanded, helping them secure crucial equipment. Multiple copies, Patel confirmed. But Reland's forces aren't just here to destroy data, they're here to plant evidence. We intercepted communications suggesting they plan to fabricate proof that humans have been secretly weaponizing terraforming technology. Another explosion, closer this time, sent tremors through the station. The lights flickered ominously. Aria's comm unit crackled with Theron's voice, Arya, we have multiple breaches. Boarding parties heading toward your position. Whatever you're going to do it fast. She made a split-second decision. Dr. Patel, initiate Protocol Omega. The scientist's eyes widened. But that would mean destroying everything. Yes. Arya was already entering her authorization codes. Better to lose the research than let them twist it into propaganda for war. The sound of weapons fire echoed from the corridor outside. Arya sealed the lab's doors as Patel and his team activated the emergency purge sequences. Screens began going dark, data crystals wiping themselves clean, years of work disappearing in moments. The doors shuddered under heavy impact. Through the reinforced panels, she could hear voices shouting in Astrian. Time was running out. Her comm crackled again. Arya. Theron's voice was strained. The station's defenses are failing. Reland's forces have control of multiple sections. Static interrupted the transmission. The doors wouldn't hold much longer. Arya looked around the lab, at the darkened screens and wiped servers, and knew it wasn't enough. As long as the facilities themselves existed, Reland's forces could plant their false evidence. She moved to the main control panel, entering a final sequence of commands. Warning, containment field destabilization flashed across the screen. It would destroy the lab completely, but the blast would be contained, protecting the rest of the station. The doors burst open just as she hit the final command. Ambassador Reland himself stood in the doorway, flanked by armed troops. His face contorted with rage as he saw what she was doing. Stop her, he ordered, but it was too late. The containment field began to collapse, energy readings spiking dangerously. Reland's troops retreated in panic as alarms blared. But before Arya could escape, something struck her from behind. She fell, her vision blurring. Through the haze of semi-consciousness, she was aware of being dragged from the lab. She could hear Reland shouting orders, feel the station shuddering around them. Then darkness took her, and she knew nothing more. When she awoke, she found herself in a holding cell, the hum of engines telling her she was no longer on the station. Through the energy barrier, she could see armed guards in Reland's colors. The ambassador himself stood watching her, his expression cold with triumph. Your sacrifice was meaningless, he said. Even now, my agents are planting evidence of human weapons research throughout what's left of your facilities. When I present this proof to the Empire, along with evidence of your attempt to destroy it, the old protocols will be reinstated. Humanity will be contained, as they should have been from the start. Arya met his gaze steadily. You've already lost, Relan. The Empire is changing. No amount of manufactured evidence can stop that. His response was cut off by a sudden commotion outside. New alarms began to sound, and Relan's expression shifted from triumph to concern. The ship shuddered violently, and through the small viewport, Arya saw multiple vessels dropping out of hyperspace, ships bearing the new insignia of the reformed Imperial fleet. Relan's victory had been premature. The real battle was just beginning. The news spread through the celestial station like wildfire. Prince Theron had been forcibly recalled to Astrea Prime. Emperor Validus's official statement cited concerning behavioral patterns and unauthorized research activities as the reasons for his son's immediate departure. Arya watched from the diplomatic wing as the Astrean royal shuttle departed, its crystalline hull gleaming against the backdrop of space. The data crystal Theron had given her felt like a burning secret in her quarters. She had already transferred its contents to multiple secure locations, but kept the original close, a tangible reminder of everything they'd risked. The crystal contained more than just research data. It held personal logs, private correspondence between Astrean officials, and most damning of all, evidence that Emperor Validus's anti-human policies were based on manufactured threats. The situation is deteriorating rapidly, Senior Ambassador Nathaniel Reed informed her during an emergency meeting of the Earth delegation. His weathered face showed the strain of the past 48 hours. Emperor Validus is not only demanding Prince Theron's permanent withdrawal from all diplomatic functions, but he's also pushing for immediate implementation of the human containment protocols. He's moving too quickly, Arya observed, her diplomatic training helping her maintain composure despite her inner turmoil. These protocols weren't scheduled for review for another 6 months. Unless he knows something we don't, Reed finished, his eyes sharp. Arya, I need to ask this directly, what exactly was the nature of your collaboration with the prince? Before she could answer, the station's emergency alerts blared to life. Red warning lights pulsed through the corridors as Security Chief Desmond burst into the conference room. Multiple Astrean warships just dropped out of hyperspace, he reported grimly. They're demanding immediate access to all research facilities in the human sector. Arya's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. On what grounds? Theft of classified Imperial technology, Desmond replied. They're claiming we've stolen proprietary terraforming secrets. Emperor Validus himself is leading the delegation. Reed turned to Arya, his expression grave. Whatever is really going on, we need to know now. The next few hours could determine the future of human-Astrean relations. Arya's mind worked rapidly, calculating risks and possibilities. Get me secure access to the quantum communications array, she said finally. There's someone who needs to hear this conversation. Hours later, Arya stood in the station's main diplomatic chamber, facing Emperor Validus himself. The Astrean ruler's presence was overwhelming, his anger palpable in the way the very air seemed to crackle with energy around him. You dare to accuse me of fabricating threats? Validus's voice resonated with centuries of absolute authority. When it is your kind that has corrupted my son, turned him against his own people? Your son wasn't corrupted, Your Majesty, Arya replied, her voice clear and unwavering. He was enlightened. Our research proves that human and Astrean approaches to terraforming can work in harmony, creating methods more effective than either of us could achieve alone. Research conducted without Imperial authorization, Validus countered. Breaking dozens of our most sacred protocols. Sacred protocols based on lies, a new voice rang out. The chamber's doors had opened to reveal Prince Theron, flanked by members of the Astrean Science Council. His father's face contorted with shock and rage. How dare you return without permission, Validus began, but Theron cut him off. The Council has reviewed our research, Father. All of it. Including the evidence of how you and your advisors manipulated data to maintain restrictions on human expansion. Theron's voice carried the same authority as his father's, but tempered with compassion. For centuries, you've taught us that humans were too volatile, too unpredictable to trust with advanced terraforming technology. But the truth is, their methods could save dozens of struggling Astrian colonies. The chamber erupted in murmurs as members of various delegations processed this revelation. Validus's face had gone pale, his hands clenching into fists. You would betray your own people? Your heritage? I would save our people, Theron corrected. From stagnation. From fear. From the arrogance that makes us believe we alone know the right way forward. His eyes met Arya's across the chamber. Humanity has much to teach us about adaptation, about growth. Just as we have much to teach them about stability and patience. Validus looked around the chamber, seeing support for his position crumbling. Members of his own delegation were already conferring with the Science Council representatives, reviewing the evidence on their data pads. His voice, when he spoke again, was cold with fury. You think this changes anything? I am still Emperor. The military still answers to me. I could order this station stripped bare, every human research facility in our territory shut down. No, Father, Theron's voice was gentle but firm. You couldn't. Because I've already sent the evidence to every major world in the Empire. The Council has called for an immediate review of your fitness to rule. They're asking me to serve as regent until the review is complete. The silence that followed was deafening. Arya watched as the weight of reality settled over Emperor Validus, his shoulders slowly slumping as he realized the extent of his defeat. The ground was shifting beneath his feet, years of careful control crumbling in a matter of moments. But it was what happened next that would be remembered in diplomatic archives for generations to come. Rather than fight, rather than rage against the changing tide, Validus looked at his son, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. When did you become so wise? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. When I learned to look beyond our own borders, Theron replied. When I allowed myself to see through someone else's eyes. The implications of what had just transpired would take months to fully unfold, but in that moment, Arya knew they had witnessed the beginning of a fundamental shift in the balance of power between their peoples. The cost would be high, careers would end, alliances would shift, and countless protocols would need to be rewritten. But as she caught Theron's eye across the chamber, she saw in his smile the promise of something worth all the upheaval, a future where their peoples could work together openly, where innovation and tradition could find common ground, where love could bridge the gulf between stars. The battle for the future of human-Astrian relations played out in the space around Reland's flagship. Arya watched from her cell as energy weapons crisscrossed the void, reformed Imperial vessels engaging the rebel fleet with precision and coordination that spoke of careful planning. Theron had clearly been prepared for this possibility. Reland paced before her cell, his carefully maintained composure cracking as reports of his fleet's losses poured in. This changes nothing, he snarled. Even if you destroy every ship, the evidence we planted won't matter, Arya interrupted, a smile playing at her lips. Did you really think we wouldn't have contingencies? Every piece of research, every communication, every scrap of data in those labs was tagged with quantum-locked verification signatures. Your forgeries won't stand up to scrutiny. The ship rocked violently as another volley struck their shields. Reland's guards exchanged nervous glances as warning klaxons blared through the corridors. Through the viewport, Arya could see more Imperial ships arriving, boxing in the rebel fleet. Sir, one of Reland's officers called out, we're being hailed. It's the Regent himself. The main viewscreen flickered to life, revealing Theron's face. He looked battle-worn but resolute, his authority radiating even through the transmission. Ambassador Reland, your position is compromised. Surrender now, and your people will be treated fairly. Reland's laugh held an edge of desperation. Fairly? Like you treated your own father? The great Emperor Validus, reduced to house arrest while his son dismantles everything he built? My father built an empire on fear and deception, Theron replied calmly. I'm building one on truth and cooperation. Your choice now is simple: be part of that future, or be remembered as someone who tried to stop it. Another impact rocked the ship, harder this time. Emergency lights flashed as systems began to fail. Rieland's officers were already abandoning their posts, sensing the inevitable end approaching. Sir, one of the remaining guards reported, our engines are critical. Shields are failing. We need to. The ship lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. In that moment of chaos, Arya saw her opportunity. She had been quietly working on the cell's control panel, using techniques she'd learned from Theron about Astrian security systems. With a final override sequence, the energy barrier flickered and died. Rieland turned at the sound, but too late. Arya was already moving, years of diplomatic security training taking over. A swift strike dropped one guard, while she used his momentum to disarm another. Rieland reached for his weapon, but froze as she leveled the captured gun at him. It's over, she said firmly. Don't make this worse than it already is. The ship's main doors burst open, admitting a squad of Imperial troops led by Theron himself. He took in the scene, Arya holding Rieland at gunpoint, the ambassador's defeated posture, and allowed himself a small smile. Perfect timing, Arya remarked, lowering her weapon as the troops secured Rieland and his remaining loyal guards. Theron crossed to her quickly, his eyes scanning her for injuries. When we lost contact with the station, I feared, he stopped himself, awareness of their audience preventing him from saying more. But his relief was evident in the way his hand briefly touched hers. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. Rieland's co-conspirators were rounded up, their carefully planted evidence exposed and discredited. The attempted coup had ironically strengthened Theron's position, proving that the old guard's resistance to change would only lead to more conflict. 1 month later, Arya stood on the observation deck of the newly rebuilt Celestial Station, watching the first joint human-Astrian terraforming fleet prepare to depart for Proxima b. The ships represented a perfect blend of both civilizations' technology, human innovation married to Astrian precision. Having second thoughts? Theron asked, joining her at the window. Since the battle, his role as regent had been formally confirmed by the Imperial Council, with broad support for his reforms. About the project? No. Arya turned to face him. About us? That's more complicated. Is it? His hand found hers, no longer hiding their connection. The Council has accepted that the Empire must change. That includes ancient laws about royal marriages and succession. Arya raised an eyebrow. Are you proposing to me in the middle of a diplomatic crisis, Your Highness? I'm proposing that we stop pretending our personal and professional lives can be separate. He drew her closer. The next few years will be challenging. Implementing these reforms, merging our technologies, changing centuries of prejudice and mistrust. I need a partner who understands both worlds. And the fact that this partner happens to be human? Is exactly the point. His smile held all the warmth of a binary star system. We're not just building new worlds, Arya. We're building a new way of living among them. Through the viewport, they watched as the terraforming fleet engaged their drives, beginning their journey to transform their first joint project world. It was a fitting metaphor for their own journey, breaking new ground, facing unknown challenges, but moving forward together. The old Emperor Validus, from his comfortable exile, would eventually write in his memoirs that he had been wrong about humans in one crucial aspect: their unpredictability wasn't a weakness, but a strength. They brought change, yes, but change was what kept civilizations alive and growing. As Arya and Theron stood together, watching humanity in the Astrian Empire take their first steps into a shared future, they knew that their story would be told for generations, not just as a political turning point, but as proof that love could bridge the gaps between stars, between species, between the weight of tradition and the promise of tomorrow. The next chapter of their journey was just beginning, and like the terraforming fleet disappearing into the depths of space, its possibilities were endless.